Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the book Refuge and welcome to week 37 of 2021 where we're going to talk about some books that I read. I have gotten through I think 15 books in the last week. It still was another very slow week at work, so I was able to actually listen to audiobooks at work this week, which I was totally fine with people at work, but one of the financial guys was like, literally you started at like the 2 weeks where we have been super slow, but he's like, I promise it's going to be busier from here. And I'm like, I'm not complaining, like I'll just keep reading until things get busier, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, I was able to get through a good amount of books, so that's wonderful. Before we dive into that, I do have a shout out for a new channel member. Thank you so much to Rutu for joining the channel memberships. It means so much to me that you want to support my channel. If you're interested in channel memberships, I have a wide variety of options that you can check out in the description below, or check the join now and see what it's about. Tomorrow, or the day that you're seeing this actually, is one of our Fated Friend Hangouts, which means people get to hang out privately with me and either chat face to face or ask me questions or whatever they want. And you can be a part of that if you want, or however, what other level you would choose. But let's go ahead and dive into these because I have some interesting thoughts to say about some books. It was a very interesting reading week for me. So let's go ahead and start with a book that was on my TBR actually, which is Deep Desire by Z.A. Maxwell. This is an paranormal romance between a, what do we call him? He is a historical erotica, like Indiana Jones basically. So he finds old documents or art pieces that are erotic, and he will make sure they end up in a museum basically. Literally the back says he's the Indiana Jones of historical erotica. And there happens to be this book that he finds that is a journal that is erotic, gay romance basically. And it turns out that the vampire who wrote it is still alive, and he wants his personal journal back. He lost hold of it in the 40s when Nazis got a hold of all of his like personal documents when he had to flee the country, I guess. His name is Dante, by the way, but with like a D-O, so it's Dante. He's very specific. I'm not Dante, I'm Dante. And so Dante finds out that Auden has this book, and he tries to seduce it away from him. I figured out that this is the first in maybe a trilogy. I'll tell you, I didn't love this a lot. I really didn't like it. One thing too, this was written quite a while ago. Like, this book was written in 2009. So I wonder if part of it is the time that it was written in, but it just didn't jive for me. I had some issues with it, and it's tough to explain why. Also, this wasn't an HEA because it's the first in a trilogy, and I wasn't intrigued enough to continue, so I don't really have too much more to say about this. But I did read this as a prompt of, I think it was at the time, a new to me author was the prompt, and I've never read a Z.A. Maxwell before. But maybe it would click for you more. Maybe you'd want to read the whole trilogy because it was really interesting. I like the idea of male-male vampire romance. So see how you feel about it. Then I just needed a little quickie to set me straight, and so I read Games We Play by Dana Islay. This is a new release. This is a 90-page smutty novella. It is about this gamer who is supposedly based off of Corpse Husband. So he wears a mask. He has this incredibly deep voice, and there's this woman from like a gamer newspaper or like web thing who's coming to interview him, and he explains that part of his like business is that people will like pay him to say very sexy things in his voice. And so she asked him to show him what he means, and they end up agreeing to one night together, testing out all of the like kinky things he likes to do. So this was very sexy. It had some types of BDSM play that I'm not a huge fan of, including pet play. However, it wasn't done in a way that made me overly uncomfortable. It really was like she sat at his feet and had a collar on, and he held her leash while he was doing some work. And it was one tiny part of the book, but I just wanted to share with you because pet play is one of the like kinks that it makes me extremely uncomfortable. And so I'm just telling you, again, no kink shaming, no hate if people like it. I like when someone's called good girl. I like when someone is called like, you're my pet, but I don't actually like that. So anyway, getting specific about Jen's kinks. However, I loved this book. I had a wonderful time with this little quickie, and I gave it 5 stars because it ended up just being so much fun. Because again, the parts that made me uncomfortable were very quick, and strangely, it had a very believable HEA for me by the time it was over. So this is going to be a part of a series, and I feel like Dana also did a great job setting up the next characters in the series too. So I really enjoyed that. Then I had a DNF, Pretty Little Mess by Carmel Rhodes. This was actually a viewer recommendation one, and I think it was recommended anonymous, or even if it wasn't, I won't say who recommended it because I didn't look it up, because I hated this. So I'm sorry if this was recommended in good faith, but I thought this was a fucking disaster. Our hero, oh my God, this is an office romance. It's an assistant romance. And maybe part of it is that I'm an executive assistant. And if anyone ever I don't care how fucking hot he is, if someone ever talked to me this way. So I'm kind of hoping whoever recommended it because they wanted to see me rage about it. Because this book has an extremely high rating. Extremely high. And I don't fucking get it. This was disgusting, okay? So here's what has me so fired up, all right? I don't rant about books too often on here. But our hero is this playboy billionaire trying to be the head of this company because his father's the head of it and blah, 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 whatever. He has reasons. We have our heroine, who, by the way, is a black woman, who, to me, it just adds another layer of insult to the story. But I'm not a black woman, so I'm not speaking for them, but I was like, Carmel Rhodes, what are you doing? Because I've loved other stuff by this author before, and she is an author of color, and I'm like, what are you writing? Anyway, not my place to decide that. But she is like late for her first day, and she had to take the subway, and she stepped in a puddle with dubious substances in it. So she smells like urine. And when she gets into the elevator to ride up to the floor that she's supposed to go to, the hero is in there, and he says, why do you smell like piss? That is the first thing he says to her. Direct quote, why do you smell like piss? By the end of this ride up to, because she's going to the HR floor and he's going to his floor, he has a nickname for her called Piss Girl. Yep. Which he continues to call her as far into the book as I read, which I read to 50% of this book, which was when they decide to have a sex deal. Because here's the rest, I'll finish the layout of this. Turns out, of course, she's his assistant. He continues to call her Piss Girl, like at work, in front of people, disrespecting her. He is rude to her because he doesn't want his attraction to win out, so he's a complete asshole because he does fuck his assistants. But recently, the business finally made a rule that you can't fuck your assistants anymore, which should have been obvious. And so he's trying to be mean to her to get her to leave. And she writes a fake resignation letter to just kind of let all of her feelings out. And of course, she ends up sending it. And as soon as he gets this letter that she's quitting, he's like, I don't have to hold back anymore. And so they fuck in his office. And then she tells him, she's like, I didn't mean to send that letter. It was just so I could get my feelings out. And he's like, okay, well, you could still work here, but we're going to have sex 5 times. And that'll get you out of my system. And she's like, okay, well, let's set up some rules. So they both are setting up some rules for it. And she's like, you need to stop calling me Piss Girl. And he's like, that is a hard no. I will not stop calling you Piss Girl. I think I've said enough about why I hate this book. We're going to move on because apparently a lot of people like it. Maybe it turns a corner. That's wonderful. But when the woman directly asks you to stop calling, and not even as a joke, they're like, maybe you shouldn't call me that in the office. She's like, please stop calling me that. It offends me. He's like, no, that's my nickname for you. I'll be calling you piss girl. But I still want to fuck your pussy. That's okay, right? No. Moving on. So then I read another viewer recommendation. I just went on and I read Breaking Out by Samantha Wayland. This was an MMF, and this was one of the sweetest MMFs I've ever read. It was so low angst. And from some of my other friends who've read other Samantha Wayland, I guess she does write pretty low angst LGBTQ books. Some of them, like I know my friend Justin, she read one of the, like, I don't know if it was hockey. I think it was hockey, male. And she was like, it was very low angst. So this one is actually a boss and assistant who are like really good friends. They've been friends for 5 years. They're very close. And someone is coming after the boss, I believe. And so she happens to be at his home, and I can't remember what she's doing, but she has a key. She stopped in to do something. Remember, she's his assistant and his best friend, so that's not weird. And some men come to take her, and she ends up hiding in the panic room. And when our hero gets there to let her out of the panic room, he asks her to stay and wait for him so he knows she's safe. The dam kind of just bursts, and they hug and they like kiss each other right there, and they never have time. Well, they eventually do, but in the moment they don't even have time to talk about it. They're just like, we're gonna stop pretending we don't love each other, because this one moment in time just kind of shook us out of it. So that's the MF part of this. Okay, these two decide that they're not going to fight this anymore. Well, then they get assigned a bodyguard through this special company who is, you know, going to be their full-time bodyguard. And they are immediately both attracted to him. He's immediately attracted to both of them. And there's wonderful communication in this. They all just kind of end up being like, we are super attracted to everybody. Let's have a threesome is kind of what happens. Which it's funny because this MF, the male and female, they haven't even like done anything together yet. And some of their first stuff, they just are all together. Also, I loved because our heroine, she's actually the only one of them who's had a threesome before. And she's also very sexually experienced. And it's a constant surprise to both of the men, and they love it. They love how much she knows. There is pegging in this book. Our heroine, I wouldn't call her like a dom, but she is, you know, more sexually knowledgeable, and she does like having a turn, being in control. And particularly the hero who's her boss, he is more submissive. And then our hero who's the bodyguard, he is pretty dominant, but he will switch. So this was just a combination of so many things I love. I love an MMF. It was they were so romantic. There was no angst from the family or from work or any of that stuff. It was really one of those where it's like it's a complete fairy tale. And it was the perfect book to read after the shit show that came before it. And I love this. I gave it 4.5 stars. The only reason being is that I was only cared about this relationship, this throuple, and it was almost like the plot was getting in the way of that. And I don't know if it could have been a little smoother, but the author really did like dive headfirst into this plot, and so then I was like, or into this relationship, and so then I was like, I don't care about this plot, like this plot's in the way of what I want. So not quite perfect, but it was great. Then I did a reread of one of my favorite books ever, and I don't know why. Well, I kind of do. I've been wanting to reread it for a couple months now. And so I just decided to do it one day this week. I was like, you know what? I need some Carter Mahoney medicine. And so I reread Untouchable. I have read this book many times. I have marked it before. This time I annotated it. I put my marks in here. And this was still 6 stars for me. Oh God, there's so much I could say about this book. Dear Lord, there's so much I could say about this book, and I have talked about it so many times, and I know so many of you have read it because of me. Carter Mahoney just hits different. I was having a discussion with a friend today, because technically this is called a bully romance. To me, it's more of a dark romance, because the bully romance, like, Carter is so much more than a bully, and here's why. This is the way I explained it to my friends when I was talking this week, because I just had to work through this in my head. To me, a bully romance doesn't work. this is a hot take for me. I don't like them. I don't like bully romances. Because to me, the hero never has a good reason for bullying. Okay? There's never a good reason for it, in my opinion. Speaking as someone who's been bullied, there's never a good reason for it, ever. And so the hero never grovels enough for me. The hero, how is he supposed to be lovable to me when his only, like, the only thing that, you know, is he's a bully, okay? This is different than any other kind of dark hero trope where it's like captor captive or a, you know, mafia or whatever, because those are almost fantastical. Like, it's very unlikely you're going to be stolen by a mafia kingpin and be made his woman, okay? But bullying happens every day, all the time. And though there are some of my high school bullies who are actually my friends now, like really good friends, they haven't done to me some of the things that bullies do to people in these books, okay? Okay. I'm also speaking on this because I read a bully romance later in the week that we're going to talk about, and it did this thing where it's like, there's never a good reason. It's always a misunderstanding or this or whatever. And again, this is my hot take. This is how I feel. I know plenty of people love bully romances and it works for them, but they just don't work for me because I want my twisted men to be like so bad or so over the top that it's like not rational. And therefore, I don't have to rationalize why I like them. It just goes to a place for me. And for me, that's what Carter does. Our introduction to him when he's face fucking, when he's assaulting this woman, it's so bonkers. It's so evil. Like, it's evil that we're like, how can I be on board with this? And the more that Zoe asks that question, the more that she dives into Carter's head, the more that she's able to, they manipulate each other, the way that they're able to maneuver and realize that they really care for each other. Because it's so out of the realm of possibility, to me it transcends the bully trope, and this is more of a dark romance to me because of that. Because when you, like, when I've reread, you know, this is the 5th, 6th time I've reread this book, there aren't actually a lot of bullying moments that happen. She's being bullied by other people, and Carter kind of makes that okay because he's disliking her, and then he makes it not okay because he loves her and he makes that stop. So to me, this isn't like, this is a woman who's being bullied who then falls for someone who did, like, this is more of like falling for your, you know, he assaulted her or something. I don't know. Carter Mahoney just isn't going to work for some people. He doesn't have to. But in the same, like, vein of it, this is where it splits off for me. Like, to me, this is different and more than a bully romance. Whereas a bully romance, there's a stupid reason for why they're bullying them. Like, it's always a good reason in their head, like, I need revenge, or they did this thing that ruined my life, or, oh, they rejected me and so now I hate her, or whatever. It's always a petty, stupid reason. Carter doesn't pretend to have a reason. His literal reason is that he is obsessed with her. He face fucked her and she stared him in the eyes and wouldn't back down, even when she was being humiliated and mistreated. And he's like, who the fuck is this woman? I need her. And in a bully romance, it's like, okay, when you guys were in 8th grade, she did something that pissed you off and you're making her life miserable. Like, Carter Mahoney doesn't pretend that she did anything to him. You know, he straight up just is like, I'm a psychopath. Well, he's like, I'm not a psychopath. He's a psychopath. I'm not a psychopath, but I want you. He's not like, oh, you did something that hurt me, let me do that. But anyway, I reread this book. It was still a 6-star book. It's fucking amazing. I love it. That's it. The end. All right. Then I read Saint by Sierra Simone, which I think a lot of my loved ones, my loved friends have read this week. And what is there to say? Like, what is there to say? This book was beautiful. I knew it would be beautiful. It's painful in only the way that Sierra Simone can do. Gianna Darling was just on my channel last weekend, and she said something that, like, Sierra Simone is equally a poet and a smut writer. And it's like the place where they meet is poetry and smut. And I'd agree with that. This is an MM romance. This is a former billionaire playboy becomes a monk, and his brother's best friend, who used to be his boyfriend, comes to visit him at the monastery he's at to tell him that he's getting married to someone else, obviously. And he's actually there to write an article for reasons, whatever, but he wanted to see the life that Father Patrick is living now and see why he left him for this. Obviously, I don't want to spoil that for you, so instead I'm going to kind of say the trigger warnings, and I feel like the trigger warnings will kind of explain that for you. So if you don't want to know anything, leave now, because I'm going to tell you. This is very much a mental health journey book. And we had our hero, Aiden Bell, who was right at the edge of hurting himself. And he needed to do something drastic. And in a moment of desperation, he gets a lifeline. And he decides that that lifeline is God. He's seen, you know, other people that he cares about try that. And so he does this. He completely cuts himself off from everything. The thing is, he had someone who was the love of his life, and he didn't explain what happened or why he left or what was going on. And so a lot of this book is Aiden getting to the place where he can tell him what happened. I will tell you, like, a lot of people are gonna have more articulate things to say about this than me. When I read Sierra Simone's books, I'm generally just in agony the whole time, and they're not something that I enjoy, but I feel compelled to read because they're so beautiful. And that is true. That's absolutely true. If you've read Priest or Sinner or her Thornchapel series or her new Camelot series, you know what I mean. Like, this absolute beauty that is so agonizing that you're just left shell-shocked when you're done. I give this one 4.5 stars. No, I just couldn't quite give it 5 stars because, again, I found very little enjoyable about the story. And a lot of people won't care. Like, it's totally okay. This is absolutely beautiful. But there was so little that was enjoyable while this was happening that it just hurt so much. And some people will want to read that, and that's fine. This isn't the kind of male story that I want to read. She did still say that there'll probably be more books in this series because there's still one more Bell brother. There's Ryan, who I didn't even remember Ryan. And then Father Jordan is going to get a book, which I don't know if that'll be part of the Priest series or if it will be in a different thing because he's not a Bell, but we'll see. So this is beautiful. Some of the kinks in this one, there is a chastity device used. Again, like, I would push that towards like self-harm in some way too for how it's being used, so know that. But obviously we're dealing with the kind of mental illness, and the suicidal ideation is a trigger warning in here, as well as, what was the other one? Shucks. Oh, this one isn't a trigger warning, but there is role-playing is a big kink in this one. So that's fun. So this is a brother's best friend, second chance romance, monk. So there you go. Then I finished Enthralled by Tiffany Roberts, which I was not expecting to hurt me so bad. This is book 2 in the Spider's Mate trilogy, and I thought the cliffhanger from the last one was bad. No, this one was devastating. Like, oh my god. I'm really obsessed with this trilogy, and I'm very excited to read some more of Tiffany Roberts' like backlist. Like, I've read some of their stuff before. If you don't know, this is a couple. This is a husband and wife couple. They actually have a TikTok now, and it's hilarious. So they write all their books together. But book 3, I think, comes out the end of October. Like, I don't think it's too far away. But this is about these humans crash landed on this planet. The first one to wake up is Ivy. She gets saved by Katan, who is they're called Vrisk. It's hard to pronounce, but spider beings, basically. They had a very slow, beautiful burn in the first book. In the second book, we are rescuing some more of the humans from the ship. So a lot of the humans on this ship died. But there are some who are still in cryo sleep, but they're running out of time. And so Ivy convinces Katan that we need to wake them. Humans are very adaptable, she said. She's like, look at me, like, we can do this. So Katan, he rounds up some of his brothers who are like his friends and comrades who are willing to go against the queen, who is our big antagonist, and they're willing to help as well. Some of the humans are not cool with what's happening. Obviously they woke up and there's these spider people there, and they haven't had the same amount of time that Ivy has to get used to it, but we're starting to work together. And then there was a cliffhanger that ripped my heart out. Like, seriously, it hurt so bad. I was like, what are you doing to me? And I remember why I don't like trilogies. But I gave this 4.5 stars. I really, really love this trilogy so much. Like, I promise you, no matter how weirded out you are by the idea that's a spider, this being, Katan, is so caring and protective and loving that it makes me ache. He's so wonderful with Ivy. It's beautiful. Then I got to read a book that I never thought I was going to get to read. Like, holy shit. I read Vic by Belle Aurora. Now, if you don't know, there's a book called Lev by Belle Aurora that hero is on my swooniest heroes list ever. It's a video I made a couple of years ago now where I talked about the swooniest heroes I read. This was, up to this point, a standalone, even though it was always meant to be a series. I don't know the story behind why Belle didn't continue. There was no note in the arc. I'm hoping there will be in the final copy, because seriously, like, Vic came out in 2015, okay? I didn't read it until 2019, and then I discovered what a horrible mistake I made because a new book hadn't come out in 4 years, and Vic and Sasha had like covers, but they hadn't been updated in forever. So through Give Me Books PR, I saw that there was an ARC sign up for Vic, and that Vic is coming out on Tuesday. And I was like, holy fucking shit, I'm reading it. And I got the ARC and I read it. Now, that was all my enthusiasm for it. How I felt about the book is a little bit different. Part of it, I think, is that I'd forgotten a lot about it. Part of it is that I was more interested in Vic and Muna than I kind of was in this couple. This series is called The Shot Callers, and it's kind of like mafia adjacent. Like, it's not as fully mafia as some other things might be, right? Which is okay, which is cool. It's fine, whatever. Yeah. And so this one is so hard to describe because this book starts with this couple, Vic and Nastya, who Nastya is Vic's sister, or no, is not Vic's sister, is Lev's sister. So this is like a brother's best friend, but they've been together for a long time. Okay. And I didn't reread Lev because I didn't have time. So I don't remember if I believe their like breakup happens at like the end of that, because Vic is keeping some secrets from Naz, and she wants to get married and like have their future together, and he's been keeping secrets. So she breaks up with him and is like, until you're willing to tell me your secrets, like, we can't be together. Like, I'm not going to do this with you. Like, I'm not going to like not have all of you. But Vic is like, I am still going to be around all the time. Like, I'm not going to remove myself from your sight and let you get over me. So there's a lot of like angry sex and then regretting it from Nasa's point of view. Also, the miscommunication is so frustrating for me, which is why I don't love second chance romance when like, well, this one I would even say relationship in trouble, because they're not married. It's one of those where like, it made me think of like Love Her or Lose Her, where like she's like breaking up with him at the beginning of the book, but then it's like, no, don't leave me. I want to work it out. I didn't even realize we had a problem. So it was just really messy, and it's supposed to be, that's a thing. But the miscommunication for them was so much for me because they're right in the middle of it. Like, this isn't a thing where like we've been broken up or something bad happened like 5 years ago and now this is us trying to get back together. It's like we're in the middle of the miscommunication. And so the first 60% of this book is them just not telling each other what's going on. Mostly him. And then she also is having this kind of like trauma about, was it her aunt? I don't even know. So I ended up giving this 4 stars because it was great to be back in the world and I liked it, but there was a lot of things about this particular trope setup that is just not my thing. So yeah. But then Sasha's book, like I pray so much that because Vic is coming out that Sasha's book will come soon. Because Sasha is Nas and Lev's oldest brother who like runs the club, who's more of like still more involved in the mafia stuff, and his romance setup, like we get a sex scene in this book actually that's him and his love interest, and I was like, oh my god, I want that so bad. So I hope that Sasha's book comes very soon. But I did give this 4 stars. It comes out on Tuesday. If you're someone who loved Lev back in the day, like you definitely should read it. Absolutely. There was just a lot about it that like, I'm so happy to be reading this, but it's not the tropes that I want. So I was like stuck in the middle, but I'm still so happy to have it and I will definitely be promoting it still and everything. Then I read My Kind of Monster by Lilith Roman. I 100% read this because Virgo reader Stephanie on TikTok said that this was, I can't remember if she DNF'd it or like it didn't work for her. But I heard her explaining it and I was like, I have to read it because I was in a mood to read psychopaths, right? I just put up a video about psychopaths recently. And this is about this woman who she's been being held captive by like it was an online stalker who got a hold of her, and he's been holding her in his torture chamber on a mountain for 6 months. And she escapes. And she escapes into the arms of a psychopath who actually owns the mountain. And he's not like, so he's a murderer of murderers. He's one of those, which I don't care. I love it. It's a kink for me. I love it. But since she's already missing, he's like, well, maybe I should keep you. And one of the things that's been very difficult for her when she's held captive is that one of the things that she had like, so basically she's into BDSM. She's into like non-consensual stuff or consensual non-consent, stuff like that. And so she's been very ashamed during these 6 months that she's been being tortured and raped because it's like her fantasy turned against her. And so as she ends up being with this man who kidnaps her from being kidnapped, she starts to take her power back in that aspect. But now they're not completely safe because they're on the mountain with this other crazy guy who wants her back. So anyway, I know part of the reason why this didn't work for Virgo reader is that there is a weird like beginning where until we know their names, they don't have names. So they're just called her and him in the beginning, which I thought was really interesting. I'm definitely going to recommend this when it's time for like spooky books for Halloween stuff, because this was like, I almost could see this one being a movie. It'd be a very sexy, naughty movie, but just how this story was told, I feel like it could have been a film. I gave this 4 stars. I had a good time with it, actually. All right, then we get to the bully romance that made me go on a rant about Untouchable, and that's All the Little Lies by S.J. Sylvis. This was on my TBR. This was as one. I can't remember what the prompt was for this one, but I got this book in a romance reveal book box, which was really cool. And I also follow the author on TikTok, and I'd seen some of the quotes from this book, and I really wanted to try it. But it falls into that bullying trope that pisses me off, because it's something that supposedly the heroine did that ruins his life. And so it's her fault that his life is shit now. When she was 13, and it was absolutely not her fault, and so he's blamed her all this time. And she is actually in like foster care now, and she's just trying to make it until she is 18, and she wants to get a scholarship to school. So my biggest issue with this book, and I said this in like my Goodreads review, is that this author put too many obstacles on our heroine. She just swamped her in everything. Like, she has a shitty mom. She has a creepy foster father now. She is being bullied. Her father was murdered when she was young. She doesn't have any money, you know, like she's about to get, like she could be put in a group home and then end up being homeless. Like just all the shit is on her. And our hero, like she ends up at his prep school and our hero is like, you need to leave. I don't want you here. And she's like, I literally have no other choice. I need to go here. And he's like, no, I don't want you here. You ruined my life. And so then we find out the reason that's supposedly her fault for his life being ruined. And I was like, how the fuck was that her fault? She was 13. Basically, he blames her for his mother's death, which it was not her fault in any way, shape, or form. It was completely his mom's fault. Sorry, I just spoiled that. I ended up giving it 3 stars, but I shouldn't have. I should have given it less. The thing is, though, I'm very intrigued about the setup for the couple in the set, because the second book, it doesn't look like it's going to be a bully romance unless she's going to do a 180. Like, it's the heroine's best friend and the hero's younger brother, and they end up spending a lot of time together at the end of this book when they're trying to, like, keep the heroine safe or whatever from reasons. And so I don't think that it's going to be a bully romance because they're, like, friends and everything. So I don't know. So I kind of want to read that one, even though I'm annoyed with this one. I don't know. Whatever. Then I read Make It Sweet by Kristen Callihan. There is a lot of like back and forth about this right now. I originally took the stance that I believed that Someone You Love was, parts of it were plagiarized from Make It Sweet. I now don't know how I feel about it because Kristen Granada, who wrote Someone You Love, finally put out a statement that she will be removing Someone You Love from all retailers, rewriting parts of it and re-uploading it. She said she reached out to Kristen Callihan and told her about, like, I wish you, like, I have no idea. I have now read both. You know, I read Someone You Love last month. I've read this. Tori from Novel Life did make a, like, bullet pointed list of everything that was similar. I was of the stance that, you know, I jumped on the train of saying that it was plagiarized before I read it. I went off the word of some other people, okay? I don't know. I got into a discussion with some of my friends who, like, I won't say, where, like, there are so many stories that we love that are like other stories. That happens a lot. That's why there's tropes. That's why there, like, I could name some where it's like, wow, that story hits a lot of the same bullet points. The things I think that made it shady about this is that Make It Sweet, I haven't even talked about the book yet. I will. Make It Sweet came out in February. And Kristen Granada's came out in like July or August. And Kristen Granada had read Make It Sweet. Like she had it as read on her Goodreads page. Who knows who actually wrote that book first though? Like just because Kristen Callihan's book came out in February, not everyone who's a self-published author writes their books and is immediately pumping them out. So who's to say Kristen Granada didn't already have this idea and had started writing on it, and then another author comes out with a book that's like yours? Should you then change yours up more? Maybe. Maybe you should, because readers will notice this shit, right? So I don't know. I still think it was shady. I still stand with the fact that, okay, if you're removing it to change things, then I think you feel guilty about it. Also, I would have liked to see, like, I haven't heard Kristen Callihan say anything. She's a more well-known author and has been around a long time. It's not like she needs to. But I would have liked to see her say something about it, to be like, if she felt like it wasn't plagiarized, to stick up for her. And she didn't do that. So that makes me think that she feels that way about it. So I don't know. Okay, point being, I read Make It Sweet. Parts of the plot were like, and including a name, like there's a name that's the same, but it's also like pretty common name, like it happened. So again, I don't know. I'm kind of going back to being neutral about it because Kristen Granada is doing something about it, and Kristen Callihan isn't really going to be like hurt by this. Like her name is more well known. Her books are better in my opinion. So there's that. But this is about a heroine who's an actress. She's getting killed off of her show that's kind of like a Game of Thrones, and so she needs a vacation. And so she goes to stay at this little inn who is run by this French woman who has a grandson who is a football player who has concussion syndrome, and he is now a baker and a cook at this inn. And it's a grumpy sunshine. It's a slow burn. It's very sexy. It was great. It still has the same like tropes that I don't love. I don't like the like I'm afraid to love, and there's a lot more back and forth in this one that was just annoying. But it was still cute. The audiobook is Read and Listen with KU. I gave it 4 stars. I stand with Kristen Callihan no matter like what it was, even, you know, the earlier discussion that I just had. I've talked before about cancel culture. You know, I made a very like, well, I wouldn't call it controversial, but I made a very bold video about how I feel about cancel culture. And for me, like plagiarism, I still don't think someone should be canceled for something if they're willing to own up to their mistakes and change it. So I hope that's what Kristen Granada is doing. But one of the things I don't stand for is I don't stand when you give people shit or stealing, you know. I think that is where, like, for me, like, cancel culture is when something happens based on opinions, or if we're unwilling to forgive someone for something they've done. So if Kristen Granada makes these changes and has apologized, to me, that's enough said, in my opinion, because that's how I feel about shit. I still think it was shitty. I still don't maybe want to support her work going forward if that's what she's like, but I don't want to continue to like trash her and keep dredging it up if she's going to be making changes. To me, that's the difference between like cancel culture, where you actively go about tearing down someone's career because you don't like something that they said, or when you are like holding someone accountable and then we move on. So I want to move on from it, but it was weird. So then I read His Cocky Prince by McCade. I did not know this book was out until someone put it into my book recommendation form. Granted, it only came out last week, so it's not like I super missed it. But I read the first 2 books in this series near the beginning of this year. This is an age gap, takes place in Hollywood. One of our heroes is 29, and he's kind of a breakout star. And our other hero is 51, and he's realizing he's not the ingenue anymore. He's been an out gay actor for many years. And he is Asian, he's freaking gorgeous, and he is pretty annoyed that this young gentleman is going to be taking his role, and he's actually going to be playing a father in a movie, and he's just so offended by that. But he is super attracted to this younger guy. And when he comes upon our younger hero being assaulted by the director, Brendan, our older hero, steps in and claims to be his boyfriend and said, "Why are you fucking around with my boyfriend?" So this ends up being a fake dating. Cole McCade has 3 pages worth of trigger warnings at the beginning of his book, and he has his reasons for doing that or sharing that. I feel like a lot of his trigger warnings will feel like they'll scare you away. My one example for this is that he says there's knife play in this book, and I am not mocking the author putting in trigger warnings, because you know how I feel about those. I feel like they're legit. I just also want to say that though this book deals with, like, you know, it's dealing with assault and the trauma from assault and how we may deal with that, including using rape fantasy and rape play to do that, it's not as intense as that sounds when you hear me say those things. Like, I wouldn't really consider this a dark romance. It was actually very sweet and endearing. But again, my example, Cole McCade lists that knife play is a possible trigger warning in this book, where the only use of a knife, like, sorry I'm laughing, but the only use of a knife is the older hero cutting a piece of fabric off of our other hero's, like, jeans, and then the younger hero is like, "Ooh, I didn't know I was into knife play," and the other hero is like, "That would be a hard limit for me." Literally, the mention of knife play is considered a trigger warning. And I was just like, okay, he wants you to be very prepared. And I admire that. But I was joking with Tiffany because I was like, that's right. I remember the last time that I read one of his books, I was like, oh yeah, his trigger warnings are really laid out. So I gave that 4.5 stars. Okay, I need to keep going here. I read It Ain't Me Babe by Tillie Cole. This was also a viewer recommendation pick. I've had this one on my radar for a long time. This is an MC romance. This is also someone who's escaped from a cult. You definitely should check out the trigger warnings for this one. Our hero is mute. He uses sign language. He does not speak very much. He has a horrible, horrible stutter that makes it almost impossible for him to speak. He explains it as like a boa constrictor being wrapped around his throat. Our heroine is very traumatized. She has been raped and abused since she was 8 years old, so know that. They first saw each other when they were children, when she was locked inside a fence and he happened to be outside it waiting for his dad. And then 10, 12 years later, she escapes from this cult and she happens to end up in the arms of our hero again. And so this is their romance, and it sets up a bunch of other things in motion, which we'll talk about in a second. I gave this 4 stars. I knew I would have a problem with the biker speak and the biker language and some of the plot in here because I've seen other people review this book. I still found it pretty enjoyable. I mean, as you'll see, I did continue the series, but it's a lot to stomach. I'm mostly intrigued by the look of like deprogramming someone from a cult, and Tillie Cole did a lot of research into that, so that's what's amazing. Then I finally started the Midnight in Scotland series by Elisa Braden. Yes, Jesson finally got me. I read The Making of a Highlander by Elisa Braden. I gave this 4 stars. This is about a Scottish heroine named Annie and our English hero named John, and for reasons, they end up giving each other lessons. He's teaching her how to be a lady so that she can marry a lord, and she's teaching him how to be more of a Highlander so that he can win a competition that will do things. I don't want to spoil it. And this is like a hate to love. Our hero just becomes absolutely obsessed with her, and it is absolutely beautiful. Like, I really love this. The things that kept it at a 4-star were there are some weird paranormal elements in some of these books, which I'm told will happen in Elisa Braden books, which is fine. It just didn't quite work for me, this specific paranormal element that had to do with like ghosts and visions and stuff. And then the like, yeah, I don't know. I really liked it though. Because then I read The Taming of a Highlander, which is about a scarred hero who's literally very scarred. Like, he's missing an eye and he has a big scar on his face because he was in prison, wrongfully imprisoned. And actually, like, at the end of the first book, we rescue him from prison. So, because someone asked me, do you need to read these in order? And like, number one, there's only 2 of them for now. And yes, I would read them in order because they are very connected. I believe it's going to be about like Annie's brothers would be my guess, because this first one was about her brother who had been in prison, and like there's a plot with their enemies that starts in the first one and carries through. So like, just read them, just do it. They're on Anyplay. Like, all the Elisa Braden's books are on Anyplay, so there you go. I gave this one 5 stars because, okay, so this one is our scarred hero and the younger bookish playwright of the English hero from the first one. So we have Kate and Broderick. And Kate accidentally stumbles across Broderick when he is trying to get revenge for what had happened to him. And Kate kind of ruins it because she stumbles across it. She sees him beating the shit out of someone, and he looks terrifying with his scars and with his black hair and all this everything. Does he have black hair? Because Annie has red. I don't know, but he looks terrifying. And she spoils his revenge. And not only that, she then does something that kind of casts suspicion on him. So it could be her fault that he ends up going back to jail, basically. Because there's this constable who just keeps poking around. So they end up in a marriage of convenience because a wife cannot testify against her husband. And he's like, there's never going to be anything between us. We're going to be in name only. You're still going to live with your brother. We'll just be married in name only. And she's like, but then the constable could force us to get an annulment. So Kate picks up her bootstraps and she goes to seduce her husband. And it's fucking beautiful. It's wonderful. She's just this like mousy, sweet woman, and she's just like no fear. After initially, she has no fear of this big broody Highlander, and it's amazing. I gave it 5 stars. And then the last book I finished last night is Hearts Recaptured by Tillie Cole. This one is about one of the heroines from the cult who is completely brainwashed, okay? She is completely brainwashed. She believes that the cult was a good thing. She believes that she's a sinful woman, and she didn't want to be saved from them. Well, the cult, a lot of stuff happened in the first one, and our hero Kai, who is the best friend of the hero from the first one, and obviously in the MC, he is immediately just enthralled with her. Now, our heroine has been told her whole life that her beauty is a curse and that men want her and it's her fault, that she's a Jezebel and all these things. And so Kai is immediately attracted to her looks, and so she feels like such a sinful, horrible woman because she's causing him to want her, and it causes some issues and stuff. There is a huge trigger warning in this book for self-mutilation, self-harm, and like, I wouldn't completely call it attempted suicide, but it's bad, so please know that, as well as the other trigger warnings for like rape and assault, child rape that I talked about in the first one, so know that. I still gave this one 4 stars though because it's so compelling, and I'm reading the 3rd one right now because again, this cult is bananas, and So anyway, there we go. This is almost an hour. Holy shit, I didn't mean to talk that long, but it happened. Those are the 15 books that I read this week. Make sure you check out channel memberships if you're interested. If you made it all this way, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.